Welcome everyone to the 8th round of the Grenke Freestyle Chess 2026. On your screen is Joanna Schmidt. She is a German vice champion in kickboxing, and she is in wheelchair because of an illness, but has now been inducted into the World Chess Hall of Fame. She's invited to pick up the ball and to decide what position the players will play. And you can see a very nice picture of her for the first move to be made in the game. And she'll also pick up the position because it's freestyle chess. You can see Magnus adjusting his pieces, but then realizing that this is freestyle chess, so puts it aside. And Johanna, they're just staying there.
The glass ball over to Johanna, where she will draw the position.
And the glass bowl is being brought to her where she can draw the position. Meanwhile, Nodirbek Yakubboev is here, Magnus's opponent. And she draws the
So the winning
position.
position is number 332.
332.
332, Stellung 332. Thank you so much, Johanna. You can give her another round of applause.
Very inspiring character, Johanna. And by the way, very interesting first position on the board, because you can see them putting it up. The king and queen are in their original position like a normal chess game. This does seem very close to an actual position. The difference is the two rooks are on f1 and c1, the bishops are on b1 and g1, and the knights on h1, a1. So very interesting position drawn, and I think after a few moves we could get closer to a normal game of chess. Johanna is going to make the first move here. And she plays pawn to e4. Not a bad idea here, actually. And wishes good luck to Nodirbek as well. Nodirbek Yakubboev, one of the top players from Uzbekistan, 8th round of the tournament. Magnus, prior to this, has had 2 draws, so needs to get rolling if he wants to finish at the top. The players are ready, and it's time for us to get going. Handshake, off we go. What's the first move that you would play in this position is an interesting question. Would you go c4 to open up the bishop? Would you go f4 to open up this bishop? He goes pawn to c4 because this opens the bishop, the rook, and the queen. So it looks like a pretty decent move. Magnus, meanwhile, has been thinking for 6 minutes already. In freestyle chess, the first move or the first few moves are very important. He plays pawn to c5, symmetrical. And now the knight can actually go to b3, attack this pawn. It goes bishop e4, putting pressure here. Ooh, nice move actually. How do you even defend it? Maybe with the queen. That's a nice move here. The bishop is like looking really powerful. And Magnus brings his queen to c7, defending the pawn, also looking at h2. You must keep that in mind. And now maybe knight g3, just continuing your development, but he goes g4. Actually a nice move because you want to play knight g3, but you don't want your pawn to be on g2. So pawn to g4, taking more space on the king side. Magnus brings his knight to b6. And this knight is currently maybe eyeing these squares, but they are covered. Even this is covered. But could be that you are preparing d5 with the bishop also looking here. Maybe f6 next. Knight to g3. Have a look at this knight. Actually, it can go to a very, very dangerous square and then attack the g7 pawn. That is a weakness. Whoa! Magnus takes the pawn. Wow, what a move. And the main point here is that if you take rook c4, there's f5 attacking the rook and the bishop. And if you go bishop d3, I take, and play f4. My goodness, what is this kind of play by Magnus? f3 even. And if you take knight g6, he's assessed this incredibly well. This is brilliant chess, but he doesn't take, he plays f4. And in comes f5 by Magnus, and that's a mistake. The best move was f6 defending here, but f5, and now pawn takes f5. This is some high level stuff by both the players. In 5 moves, you can see Nodirbek down to 47 minutes. Magnus has 51 minutes. G takes f5, and it should be really, really good. But he takes with the knight, attacking g7. What could be more natural than that? But pawn takes f5, d5, and bishop g2 would have given white an advantage. But knight takes f5 taken. And now g6 is the best move. And Magnus finds it. Great move. Imagine the number of complications that have been navigated by these players in just 6 moves. Knight goes to h6. Now threatening to take and then take on c4. But there's a beautiful move that black has. Rook takes f4. And Magnus finds it. Rook takes f4 on the board. If you take on g8, then I can take on e4. And if you play the move d3 trying to attack here, then there is queen a5 check, which is deadly. Crazy. This is just crazy what's happening here. Oh, he goes for it. But that's not a good move. Maybe there was also bishop f3 and white is slightly worse, but knight g8, and now Magnus can take on e4. Will he take it? Nice move. And if d3, there is queen a5 check. He goes queen to b3. And pawn to d5 played, defending the knight. The queen comes up to b5, giving a check. I can play queen c6. Queen d7 would be a huge blunder because of rook f8 and white wins. So queen takes queen. Rook takes. And now maybe the idea is d3. Because otherwise the knight is simply trapped. Yeah, you get back your piece. But now rook takes g4. Magnus chops off a pawn. I would say this is one of the most incredibly complex games I've ever seen in freestyle chess. Pawn takes pawn, and now d takes c4. If you count the number of pawns, black has 7 of them, white has 4, so 3 pawns for a piece. But the knight can't easily come out to b3, so maybe knight c2. He goes rook to c3. And now Magnus brings his bishop to e5, attacking the rook and the pawn. The rook comes to e3, hitting the bishop. If you take here, then e7 pawn is hanging. So have to be very careful. Magnus here. The best move is knight f7. Because if rook takes f7, well, he sees it. He finds it. Look at this. So amazing. There's rook takes g1 as an intermezzo. So knight comes to c2. And now Magnus plays another amazing move, g5. Bishop comes to f2. And that's the point of g5. You can put the rook on g6 and win this so that the knight can no longer come out. Amazing, amazing play. And Magnus, who is now going to win back his piece, and Yakubboev will be 3 pawns down. Takes on e7, king e7, and you can already resign the game. Maybe not, maybe there's a pin. You keep fighting. How about rook e6? He brings his rook, but now you can take on f7, king f7, and bishop e5. Yeah, that's what he does. Rook takes, king takes. Somehow it seems like Magnus has seen this all. Bishop e5. And now rook g1 check. He goes b5. He's simply pushing his pawns. The pin here is quite bad. Pawn to a3. Check. King d2. a5 played. Pushing forward on the queen side. And he plays bishop to c7. And pawn to b4. Pushing this forward as well. Rook f3 check. And he plays his king up to g6. The thing is, these queenside pawns are just so strong, and the rooks are so active. Once again, Magnus actually understanding these things so deeply. Takes the pawn on a5, and now there's this insane move c3. Lovely move. Pawn to c3. If you take on c3, then b3 is coming in. So he plays pawn to b3, trying to stop the pawns. Maybe just rook g2, attacking the pawn on e2. Yeah, he plays it. And I mean, if you have to play a move like rook f2, I can simply take and play c4 with the idea of b4. So he goes rook e3. And Magnus, he goes rook f6. And I think some points like check, king, rooks coming in on the last rank. This looks completely over. And nothing really is moving for white. I mean, if you take ab4, he resigns there. Rook g1 is a mate actually. So resignation, and he's talking about like what mistake did I make, and I think Magnus may not even be sure there what went wrong. But this move knight takes c4 was just so incredible. Like, think about how far Magnus must have seen. f5, because you are getting back two pieces here as white. But then to see like fg4, maybe this is good compensation, or even f4, and then looking at some moves like f3 and knight g6 could have been something that Magnus saw. And Magnus talking about some move like f3 to be played at some point. Yeah, and also kudos to Nodirbek to actually find the move f4 instead of taking back on c4. So great fight here by these players, and I think a lot to learn for everyone who wants to master freestyle chess. Magnus once again showing that he's just an insanely good player, not just in classical traditional chess, but in freestyle chess as well. He understands the game the best in the world.